Sophie had always been a giver. She noticed the little things, sending thoughtful messages, remembering birthdays, offering to help without being asked. She took pride in being reliable, in being the friend who would show up when no one else would. Yet, over time, she began to notice a pattern that left her feeling drained and unappreciated. There were people in her life who didn't seem to value her at all, and the signs were subtle but unmistakable once she paid attention. It started with the constant cancellations. Sophie's friend group would make plans weeks in advance, and she would carve out time in her schedule only to receive a last-minute text. Sorry, can't make it. Something came up. At first, she brushed it off. Life was busy after all. But the cancellations became a pattern. Invitations were ignored when she suggested meeting, but when others suggested plans, she was left out. She realized that no one was making an effort to include her. Her time and effort weren't respected. The first behavior of people who don't value you, she thought, was clear. They disregard your time. Then there were the conversations. Sophie loved talking to her close friends, sharing thoughts, fears, and dreams. But she noticed a recurring pattern. She spoke, and people listened briefly, then moved the conversation back to themselves. When she tried to share her accomplishments, they were met with indifference, a quick nod, or a "that's nice" before changing the subject. It wasn't just a single incident. It was consistent. People who don't value you rarely celebrate your wins. They are too wrapped up in themselves to care about your joys, achievements, or struggles. Sophie felt invisible in her own circle. Another behavior emerged more subtly: the expectations without reciprocity. Sophie was always willing to help: a ride to the airport, covering a shift, advice during a tough decision. But when she needed help, there was little to no response. One evening, when her car broke down on the way home from work, she reached out to a friend who had often relied on her in emergencies. There was silence. Eventually, she called a stranger for assistance. It hurt more than she expected, and she realized that people who don't value you take without giving. They expect loyalty, time, and effort, but rarely return the same in kind. This imbalance was exhausting, and Sophie began to understand that being taken for granted wasn't a reflection of her worth, it was a reflection of theirs. The fourth behavior was the absence of genuine interest. Sophie had always enjoyed deep conversations and connection. She liked learning about her friends' thoughts, but also hoped for engagement in return. Yet, she noticed that when she asked questions about their lives, the answers were perfunctory or dismissive, and follow-up was rare. They didn't ask her questions, didn't remember small details she had shared, and rarely checked in. People who don't value you don't invest emotionally. They treat relationships as convenient or superficial, reaching out only when it serves them or when it's easy. Sophie realized that these interactions left her feeling hollow, like her presence was only a utility, not appreciated for who she was. Over time, Sophie began to see the pattern clearly. She didn't need constant reassurance or grand gestures to know her value. She needed reciprocity, respect, and genuine care. The repeated cancellations, indifference to her accomplishments, one-sided support, and lack of real interest weren't coincidences. They were signs. She recognized that valuing someone means showing it through actions, not just words. One evening, after another last-minute cancellation by a friend she had been counting on, Sophie sat quietly in her apartment and reflected. She realized that her energy was being drained not because she was giving too much, but because she was giving to people who didn't see her worth. It wasn't selfish to expect acknowledgement. It wasn't unreasonable to want mutual respect. And it certainly wasn't wrong to distance herself from those who consistently ignored her value. She made a decision. Sophie didn't cut everyone off, but she started to set boundaries. She no longer rearranged her schedule for people who consistently canceled. She limited emotional labor for those who didn't reciprocate. She surrounded herself with friends who celebrated her victories, checked in without prompting, and respected her time. Slowly, she felt lighter, freer, and more at peace. The process wasn't easy. There were moments of guilt, self-doubt, and nostalgia for the friendships she thought she cherished. But each time she reinforced her boundaries, she realized that her time, energy, and presence were precious. People who value you will make it evident in their actions. They will honor your time, celebrate your achievements, support you, and engage genuinely. Sophie understood that her value wasn't diminished by others' inability to see it. It was her responsibility to protect her energy and invest it wisely. In the end, Sophie learned that recognizing these four behaviors, disregard for time, indifference to accomplishments, one-sided expectations, and lack of genuine interest, was not about judgment or anger. It was about clarity. It was about understanding who truly belonged in her life. And with that clarity, she found freedom, respect, and friendships that nourished her soul rather than drained it.